I'd like you to picture a river that you love. Maybe it's the one that flows through our town, or the town where you grew up, or it's a place that you go for solitude, or connection, or excitement. When you think about this place, how does it make you feel? Does it spark a sense of peace, joy, maybe even hope? Now think about the last time that you read a news story that made you feel that kind of hope. Perhaps it's been a while. If you scrolled the headlines this morning or any morning, you probably saw a lot of stories about conflict, disaster, environmental collapse. Doom scrolling is now a pastime. But hope scrolling, not so much. A few years ago, I realized that my career as an environmental journalist had me living in what felt like a doom scroll. So I decided to start looking for stories about solutions. And I found one that gave me real hope. And amazingly, it was actually already happening all across the country, in wild places, small towns, and big cities. But somehow, nobody was really talking about it. And maybe that's because it's not a new invention or a high-tech solution. And it's not about building something groundbreaking. It actually has to do with getting rid of what we no longer need. Dams that don't make sense. If we want to build a resilient future, we're going to have to dismantle a lot of outdated architecture and harmful infrastructure. And dams are not our only opportunity to do that, but they're actually one of the best. When I first started writing about dam removals, it was because I saw that they offered hope for recovering imperiled wildlife, like salmon. But I soon realized that they actually did so much more than that. Dam removals reconnect rivers, revitalize communities, restore environmental justice, improve public safety, climate resilience, water quality, wildlife habitat. Dam removals turn a crisis into an opportunity for meaningful and lasting change. And I was lucky enough to actually get to see this in action not very far from here. In 2024, a project was completed to remove 4 hydroelectric dams from the Klamath River, right around the Oregon-California border. Yeah. This was, as you probably know, the largest dam removal project in history. At the time, the Klamath was a river in crisis, and it had been for decades. It used to have some of the largest runs of salmon on the West Coast. But when dams were built, they blocked access to critical habitat, and those salmon populations crashed. And that was devastating for tribes, for commercial fishers, and for the whole ecosystem. Because salmon are a keystone species. And when we lose them, it's like pulling out the Jenga block that topples the whole structure. And those dams also impaired water quality. If you wanted to swim or fish in the reservoirs during the summer, you're likely to find that they were glowing green with toxic algae. And that wasn't just unpleasant to look at, it threatened wildlife and public health as far as 180 miles downriver. Conditions got so bad in the Klamath that in 2002, upwards of 60,000 salmon that were migrating from the ocean back into the river again died. The horrifying sight and smell of tens of thousands of dead salmon became a call to action. 2 years later, when 4 hydroelectric dams came up for relicensing, tribes whose homelands are in the watershed, the Yurok, Karuk, Hupa, Shasta, and Klamath tribes, led an effort to undam the Klamath. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to speak with Leif Hillman, who's a member of the Karuk tribe. And he told me, another 50 years of those dams in place mean that these tribes would be extinct themselves. So the fight for dam removal was a fight for the future of the river, but also for the people who have long called that place home. And it was also an opportunity to shine a light on a big dam problem. America has a long history of dam building, pretty much since the first colonists stepped foot on dry land. And historically, dams have served a lot of important purposes: producing power, storing water, easing river navigation, controlling floods, and many dams still do. But at last count, we have more than 500,000 dams in the US, and they have fragmented and broken our rivers. Dams are now so common on our landscape that most people don't even notice them, and fewer of us question them. But what if we did? In some states, the majority of dams are deadbeat dams, and they serve no useful purpose at all anymore. And thousands more are outdated, in disrepair, or unable to safely handle climate-amplified storms we know are getting worse. And if you're wondering, can we really afford to take down dams at a time when we need more clean energy? You might be surprised to know that less than 3% of our dams produce power. And many that do are using technology that is outdated and inefficient. And that was the case on the Klamath. The dams were old, they produced very little power, they also failed to provide passage for fish or to consider tribal rights. And when the company that owned them was suddenly faced with having to meet modern environmental laws as part of relicensing, they realized it was cheaper to remove the dams. Now that's becoming a more common story. When we built most dams in this country, there were no environmental impact reports, no consultation with tribal nations, no weighing of the pros and cons. Dams were seen as an inevitable sign of progress and a necessary part of development. But today, with dam removals, we get to rethink this manifest destiny. And watching that happen on the Klamath was extraordinary. I got to visit a number of times during the dam removal process, but one of the most memorable was actually a couple months after it wrapped up. And I got to raft down this newly emancipated section of river with biologists who were tracking returning fish. And the area that we were had been under the waters of a reservoir for decades and decades. And now it was this newly formed river channel. And already we saw beaver and muskrat dens in the riverbanks, heron stalking lunch in the shallows, steelhead swimming under our boat. And all around the hillsides had come alive with vegetation. Just a few months before, when they breached the dams and drained all the water out of the reservoirs, there was 2,000 acres of muddy, exposed land. But immediately, crews got to work replanting. And they seeded billions and billions of native grasses, herbs, and forbs. And they planted thousands and thousands of trees and shrubs and acorns and milkweed plugs. And nature began doing its own work. Willows had taken it upon themselves to reclaim these riverbanks, and we saw their red stalks everywhere. And researchers out studying found that aquatic insects had bounced back, and they are key indicators of ecosystem health. And water quality and water temperature improved with more natural flows. And salmon came swimming home. Within just days of the last bits of dam debris being taken out of the river, salmon sailed past these former obstructions and into upstream waters that their kin had not seen in a century. And they spawned in tributaries researchers thought they might not find for years. The speed at which this ecological rebuilding took place stunned even experts. In just about 2 years' time, the Klamath went from being a river in crisis to a river in recovery. And now a healthy Klamath watershed is on our horizon. Yeah. So, put simply, it is a story of hope. And I got a lot of reminders about it. Every person that I know, my friends, my family members, even acquaintances, sent me every article that they saw about the Klamath for 2 years. And I have a Google alert set for dam removal stories. So every morning that I woke up, my inbox was flooded with all these hopeful headlines. which was such a nice change of pace. And these stories came from media outlets across the country and across the world, because the wild success of undamming the Klamath became an international phenomenon. Delegations have visited from as far away as Mongolia, New Zealand, South America to see what they could learn. And I'm not surprised, because the Klamath is not the only place where we need to rethink our outdated infrastructure. What happened there was momentous, but it's also part of a growing movement with massive potential. In just the last year alone, 100 dams have been removed from rivers in the US. That has reconnected 5,000 miles of river. In the past 25 years, there's been 2,000 dams demolished across the country. In Maine, dam removals in the Kennebec watershed have brought back millions of river herring every spring. And they're aiding in the recovery of endangered sturgeon, which are these prehistoric giants that can weigh 300 pounds and leap out of the river. In Vermont, removing deadbeat dams that were worsening floods is now helping to boost climate resilience and public safety. In Ohio, along the Cuyahoga, a river that was once so polluted it caught fire more than a dozen times, there have now been 5 dam removals, and the river is teeming with aquatic life, and with kayakers and canoers who are coming to paddle new water trails and to explore new rapids. And they're helping to boost the economy in Rust Belt communities. In Washington, 2 dams removed on the Elwha River mean that that river now runs entirely free from source to sea, making it one of the few undammed rivers that we have in this country. And even here in Bend, the Colorado Avenue Dam, which was a relic of our town's mill days and a danger to paddlers in the Deschutes, was replaced with a whitewater park. And now that provides recreation and wildlife habitat. And if you've gotten to splash down those rapids yourself, then you have participated in the wonderful reimagining of rivers that can come with dam busting. There are hundreds more stories like this. But there's also thousands and thousands more dams. Most of our rivers remain fragmented, and much of our biodiversity remains threatened. But now we know that dam removals can help. They are proof that we can undo harm, proof that nature can heal, and proof that we don't have to follow the same old thinking that got us to where we are right now. We can knock down what doesn't work anymore and create something better. And that is the best news that I've heard in a long time. So I'd like to ask you again to think about that river that you love. What headline do you want to see for that place? What story do you want to read? Write the headline. Make the story come true. Let's create a new future for our rivers. Thank you.